Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another edition of Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and finally, we're able to get to some Black History talk. Uh, Sadly, at the end of February, but better late than never, huh? Happy Black History Month. Even though we only have a couple of days left in this month, I utterly refuse to go through this entire month and not discuss Black history. And so this is our Black History episode in honor of Black History Month. And today we're just gonna do things a little different. We're gonna discuss some people in Black history, just one pocket of Black Americans who made an impact in history. Not in slavery, not so much in the Jim Crow era, but the impact that they made through literature. And we're going to talk about Black writers. Some writers who works are still celebrated today. One Black writer whose novel was turned into a film in 1985 that we're going to review today, and that was The Color Purple. And so we're going to dive into that, but first we're going to just glance over some bios of some of these authors, writers, and poets, even, and dive into what they did to showcase the Black experience, through their words. First off, we have Phyllis Wheatley, who in 1773 published poems on various subjects, religion, and morality. Poems is the first book ever written and published by an African American, and Whitley was the first to achieve a global reputation as an African American writer. Her book of poems was published 3 years before America gained its independence. Phyllis Wheatley was born in West Africa, where she was kidnapped and sold into slavery at the age of 7 and transported to America, where she was bought by the Wheatley family in Boston. After she learned to read and write, they encouraged her poetry where they saw her talent. On a 1773 trip to London with her enslaver's son, seeking publication for her work, Wheatley met prominent people who became patrons. The publication in London of her poems on various subjects, religions, and morality on September the 1st, 1773. This allowed her to gain fame both in England and the American colonies. Figures such as George Washington praised her work. Phyllis Wheatley was emancipated by her enslavers shortly after the publication of her book. They soon died, and she married John Peters, a poor grocer. Uh, they lost 3 children who died young. Wheatley died in poverty and obscurity at the young age of 31 years old. William Wells Brown in 1858 had also published the first African American play called The Escape, or A Leap for Freedom. William Wells Brown was a prominent novelist, playwright, and historian in the United States. Born into slavery in Montgomery County, Kentucky, near the town of Mount Sterling, Brown escaped to Ohio in 1834 at the age of 19. He settled in Boston, where he became a prolific writer. While working to abolish slavery, Brown also supported causes like women's suffrage, pacifism, prison reform, and an anti tobacco movement. His novel, Clotel, considered the first novel written by an African American, was published in London, where he resided at the time. It was also published in the United States sometime later. Brown became a pioneer in several different literary genres, uh, including travel writing, fiction, and drama. In 1858, he became the first published African American playwright and often read from his work on the lecture circuit. Following the Civil War in 1867, he published what is considered the first history of African Americans in the Revolutionary War. He was among the first writers inducted in the Kentucky Writers Hall of Fame, established in 2013. A public school is named after him, Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was a prominent writer who had escaped from slavery and would go on to become a phenomenal public speaker, an iconic leader in the abolition movement, and one of the most famous African American authors ever. Several of his prominent books are autobiographical, depicting his experience while enslaved. Douglass was extremely intelligent. The contribution of Frederick Douglass' education essay was shattering the slaveholders' claim that people of color did not possess the intellect, you know, to be free people in America. Douglass's work are an important part of American biographical genre. In learning to read and write, Frederick Douglass promoted the importance of education as the only way to freedom. His vivid depictions of life in enslavement have fueled the abolishment movement and revealed grim truths as to the inhumane conditions which enslavers created for people, further progressing his status as a leader and a prominent figure of African American literature. He created a newspaper in 1847 called the North Star, which was very influential at the time. Other achievements included his powerful 4th of July speech and his dedication to helping African Americans gain the right to vote. On April the 21st, 1877, Douglass became the first African American to be appointed as U.S. Marshal. Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes was an American poet, activist, novelist, playwright, and columnist. He has made his career in New York City and is considered an innovator for his creation of jazz poetry and a key figure in African American literature. Hughes became prolific as a writer at a young age and even studied at Columbia University in New York City. During his time there and when he dropped out, he gained lots of attention when publishers in the area became part of the artistry community in Harlem, a community that would become very significant in Black literature. Langston Hughes High School was named after the poet for his contribution as a leader in the Harlem Renaissance. James Baldwin. James Baldwin was a novelist, an essayist, poet, and playwright. He is widely considered one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. James Baldwin essays and Notes of a Native Son explore racial and social issues as well as the experience of being Black in America. He was born the eldest son and had never known his biological father. His stepfather had never given him care or love while he was growing up. However, Baldwin grew under the mentorship of Beaufort Delaney, who was a prominent artist at the time and urged young James to explore himself through creativity. He inspired James Baldwin poems like A Man and Wonders. Baldwin was homosexual, and that, in addition to being black, had him face abuse and discrimination. Disappointed by opposition and racism, he moved to France and pursued his writing career, becoming one of the most influential black writers of the 20th century. Maya Angelou. The great Maya Angelou was an American author, screenwriter, actress, dancer, poet, and civil rights activist. She made history with her non-fictional book, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. And it included an autobiographical piece authored by Maya Angelou, Graduation. It converts what it's like to gain education during a time of racial segregation as a black person. As a civil rights movement activist, Maya Angelou traveled with Malcolm X and helped him in his political efforts. After she was arrested in the States, Malcolm X was assassinated. None of this stopped her from continuing her work with the civil rights movement. She helped raise money for Martin Luther King Jr. and also supported him heavily up until his death. Angelou was friends with James Baldwin, who, after the time of King's assassination, inspired her to write. This was when she began work on the groundbreaking book, I Know Why the Cage Birds Sing. Many of Maya Angelou's books became bestsellers and got nominated for dozens of awards, including a Pulitzer Prize and Tony Award. Maya Angelou was also the first black woman to write a screenplay for a major film called Georgia. She eventually directed her own film in 1998 called Down on the Delta, which almost got reviewed today, but I decided not to do that. In the poem Phenomenal Woman, Maya Angelou challenges stereotypical assumptions of what a woman should look like. The poem refers to the concepts of body image and femininity, trying to redefine them for herself and other women. Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison was an American novelist who had won both the Nobel and the Pulitzer Prize. She had she was also an editor and a professor. Toni Morrison poems are known for their epicness and exquisite language and rich detail of African American characters. Morrison also was the second oldest of four children, and her parents got her into reading music and folklore from an early age. Her father worked as a welder and supported his family with several other jobs, while her mother was a domestic worker. Morrison graduated high school with honors and attended Howard University, where she continued pursuing literature. At Cornell University, she wrote a thesis on Virginia Woolf and William Faulkner and got a master's degree in 1955. Toni Morrison's books got numerous awards and honors, including a Nobel Prize for Literature in 1993 and the Pulitzer for Beloved in 1988, which is also another film that I almost reviewed today. The Bluest Eyes by Toni Morrison is among the most stunning works in African American literature. It is Morrison's first published novel that tells the story of a black girl who grows up after the Great Depression. This story revolves around the girl having a deep inferiority complex due to her mannerisms and dark skin, which fuels the desire for blue eyes. Octavia Butler. Octavia Butler was an American science fiction author who had won several industry awards during her career. including the Hugo Award and the Nebula Award. She is she was the first science fiction writer and black author to receive a MacArthur Genius Fellowship. Butler grew up in the racially integrated, diverse community of Pasadena. Her experience turned into one of the remarkable Octavia Butler quotes from Adulthood Writes, Embrace Differences. She graduated from John Mayer High School and Pasadena City College with an associate's in art degree. During that time, she won in her first writing contest. Ever since, her interest in literature only grew, and she became known for a fascinating blend of science fiction and African American spiritual. Octavia Butler, believe it or not, was dyslexic, but that didn't stop her from diving into books. She started writing and creating stories from a young age, dedicating herself fully to literature at the age of 10. She maintained a very strict writing schedule while taking many jobs to make ends meet. She wrote for several hours in the early morning. 3 years after publishing her first novel, she had a career breakthrough with the novel Kindred, which is currently adapted into a Hulu show. Or is it a movie? I haven't seen it yet, but I know it's just came out in the past month or two on Hulu, so you can check that out. That is based off of Octavia Butler's first novel. Um, August Wilson. August Wilson was a famed playwright and the theater's poet of Black America. August Wilson poetry revolved around the African American experience in the 20th century US, as well as themes of race, identity, and racial discrimination. He was born to an African American mother and a German immigrant father. While Wilson was a child, his parents moved to a poor and mostly white neighborhood in Oakland. While Wilson faced racism and bigotry, he changed schools several times and before pursuing education independently at the age of 16. When he was 20, he focused on literature and began writing his first plays. August Wilson earned a Pulitzer, I keep wanting to say surprise, prize, and a Tony Award for his plays Fences, and another Pulitzer for The Piano Lesson. His plays were frequently seen on Broadway stages and known to be very influential. He is best known for the Pittsburgh Circuit, which is 10 plays set during different decades in the 20th century, focused on the Black experience in each decade. He was very influential as a playwright, and August Wilson books are often talked about when it comes to the influential Black authors on Broadway. Our last writer today is Alice Walker. Alice Walker is a accomplished novelist, essayist, and poet. Her Pulitzer winning novel, The Color Purple, was adapted into a film of the same name by Steven Spielberg. Much like everybody else that we've discussed thus far today, she was also known for her activism and influence in Black literature. Walker grew up poor in a family of 8 children. Her mother worked as a maid to support them. At the age of 8, she was shot in the right eye with a BB gun, and the accident made her withdraw socially, thinking that she was ugly and disfigured. As a result, or you can say this was a blessing in disguise, she had withdrawn into reading and writing poetry. Walker's good results in school helped her to win a scholarship to Spelman College in Atlanta, after which she had switched to Sarah Lawrence College in New York. Walker published her first short story in 1965 and became heavily involved in the civil rights movement after graduation. She participated in the 1963 March on Washington and was one of the many African American writers to detail the march. Alice Walker quotes about race and identity inspired activists to go through challenging times. The lives of Black women in the southern United States are the main focus of The Color Purple. Alice Walker raised the issues of spirituality, race, gender, and self discovery. It's one of the most influential novels in Black literature that entered the list of the BBC's The Big Read poll of the best loved novels. In the short story, Everyday Use, Alice Walker depicted Black heritage. The story is set in the Deep South, where Mama lives with her two daughters. The girls have contrasting personalities and different views on their identity and cultural background. In 1965, Alice Walker met a Jewish civil rights lawyer. They were married on March 17, 1965, in New York City. Later that year, the couple relocated to Jackson, Mississippi, and became the first legally married interracial couple in Mississippi since the laws were introduced in the state. They were harassed and threatened by whites, including the Ku Klux Klan. The couple have one daughter, Rebecca, who was born in 1969. Walker and her husband did eventually get a divorce in 1976, though. But also in 1976, Walker published her second novel, Meridian. Meridian is a novel about activist workers in the South during the civil rights movement, with events that closely paralleled some of Alice Walker's own experiences. In 1982, she published what would become her best known work, The Color Purple. The novel followed a young, troubled Black woman fighting her her way through not just racist white culture, but patriarchal Black culture as well. The book became a bestseller and was subsequently adapted into a critically acclaimed 1985 movie directed by Steven Spielberg. And that's what's going to lead us into our review. Of course, we're reviewing the 1985 classic, The Color Purple. And I remember this film coming out. And at the time, at the time, I wasn't, I mean, I was six. And so I didn't really have a grasp of what I was watching. Pretty sure I didn't see it when it first came out. I don't think we went to the theaters to go see this, but when it came on television, I'm gonna say 86 or 87, whatever, because we didn't get that instant access like we do nowadays. So we had to wait some time. But I remember seeing it on TV, of course. And I was about 7 or 8 years old, first time I watched it. And I remember my mom did not want me to watch that movie. And I never understood why. I never understood why at the time. Now I know, but at the time, actually I found out why a little bit after the fact. But she just didn't want me to watch. And of course, Kevin Reed's gonna do Kevin Reed things. I snuck and watched it anyway. So I watched the movie and I was like, man, this is wow. Because like I said, I'm 7 or 8 years old, and I'm looking at how things used to be, but I still had the frame of mind to know that this wasn't too far off in the past. This wasn't centuries ago. This wasn't like super decades ago. This is like around a period of time where my parents were alive, or grew up rather. And so this wasn't too far off. So I had that presence of mind to know that even then, as a youngster. So it did have a kind of an impact on me. Even though this film, it has dark moments. I mean, dark moments. It still had some levity to it. You know, it still had a fun kind of a feel at parts. I'm not calling this movie fun at all, but I'm just saying there were some scenes where it was funny. You know, there was some some light scenes in there where you can kind of enjoy and watch. But when it goes dark, it definitely goes dark. The Color Purple is a 1985 American epic coming of age period drama directed by the great Steven Spielberg. And man, let me tell you something. I didn't think about it then, but later on in life, I started thinking about it, and this is still an issue. This is still an issue in Hollywood. Why did you have Steven Spielberg, who, granted, is the greatest director of all time around that time, direct this movie to talk about the black experience? I love Steven Spielberg. I love Steven Spielberg, but Steven Spielberg cannot tell me about the black experience, man. you know, and that was confusing when I actually sat down and thought about it when I got a little older. You know, I go back to it again. I was young. I didn't know. All I knew is Steven Spielberg made Raiders of the Lost Ark around that time, so I didn't care about all that other stuff. And I think E.T. came out. Was E.T. before this? Yeah, E.T. was before this. So I knew he made E.T. and I knew he made Raiders of the Lost Ark. So that's all I cared about. I didn't care about uh, the black experience. I need this to come from a black filmmaker. But now I'm older, I'm wiser. Like, man, I wish we can get a black filmmaker behind this, or Ryan Coogler, or God rest his soul, John Singleton. I think John Singleton would have made an awesome Color Purple movie. I don't know about Spike Lee. As much as I love Spike Lee, I don't know if he. I don't know. I don't know if he could have did it. But despite all that, despite all that, I'm poo pooing on the fact Steven Spielberg made this movie. He made an amazing movie. I don't know who was in his ear. But I don't know who was the consultant on this film, but he nailed it. He really did. I mean, he nailed it. It truly is the black experience. This film stars, in her breakout role, Whoopi Goldberg. We have Danny Glover. We have Oprah Winfrey, Margaret Avery, Ray Dong Chong, Adolph Caesar. I mean, so many prominent black actors and actresses. We even got a Lawrence Fishburne in this movie. If you pay attention, you blink and you miss it. So many actors and actresses that have gone on to have stellar careers. Uh, Quincy Jones did the score for this film, and that was an accomplishment too, because Steven Spielberg only worked with one composer throughout his whole career, even now. John Williams. And this is the only film that John Williams did not compose for Steven Spielberg. I think this is the only one. It may have been another one in there now that I said that out loud, but can't I can't pick which one it was. I can't put my finger on which one it was, but I know this was definitely the first one. Um, but Whoopi Goldberg, who prior to this I have not seen in nothing. I didn't know who a Whoopi Goldberg was. I knew who Danny Glover was. I knew who uh oh my god, Adolph Caesar was. I've seen him in other things, but I didn't know who Whoopi Goldberg was. And I was like, man, it was weird to see a black actress leading a film. And I'm hesitating to say this, the look of her, because Whoopi Goldberg was beautiful in this movie, but they had to make her less appealing for her character. But she's beautiful, you know? But you didn't see these type of actresses leading a film. And for that to come off, you know, it was just weird at that time. And weird in a good way. You didn't have to look like Beyonce or Holly Berry to be on the front of a movie poster. You could be a normal looking black woman. You know, and she wasn't ugly. And I know a lot of people talk about how ugly she looked in that, but she was not ugly. Whoopi Goldberg is a beautiful woman, and she was just a standardly beautiful woman. She's not this out of this world. I'm trying to say this, I'm getting myself in trouble, but she's not out of this world supermodel looking. You know what I'm saying? Alfie Ruddard, um, prominent actress who you've seen in many, many projects. She auditioned for Sealy, but ultimately didn't get it. But circling back to the Steven Spielberg of it all, Steven Spielberg didn't want to do it. Initially, he said no. He said he wasn't going to do it because he he couldn't give an honest voice to blacks in the South, so he did not want to do it, but he was convinced by Quincy Jones and Lord, I forgot who else, but I know Quincy Jones was one of the main factors into uh Steven Spielberg directing this film. And he later came on it in interviews as of late and said that this was an important film in his career because this was his first serious movie. And without this movie, without The Color Purple, he wouldn't have had the stepping stones to make films such as Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List. So, I mean, good on us. We're the winners here. Alice Walker didn't want Steven Spielberg to direct this film for the same reasons, but she turned around when Whoopi Goldberg was cast. Now, I need you to imagine 7 or 8-year-old Kevin Reed sitting down in the living room, and this movie comes on, and the first thing you see is this teenage black girl being raped by her father. And then gets pregnant and have the baby pretty much ripped from her arms and taken away. I need you to imagine the mindset of some little 8-year-old boy who, at that point, the only Spielberg in his life was Harrison Ford with a whip and a little alien with a long finger talking about wanting to go home. Just having the time of his life. And then this is what you give me. This is what you give me, Steven. At the first 10 minutes into the movie, it is like, man. Man. Then it doesn't get any better. The abusive father basically sells or give away Sealy to Mister, portrayed by Danny Glover. And Danny Glover, we all love him now, from Lethal Weapon and all those other films that he's in. Man, you want to talk about a movie villain. If Mister isn't one of the top movie villains of all time, I don't think you really paid attention to this movie. Villains don't have to be in superhero movies or action movies. They're not just exclusive to those genres. They're also in these type of films as well. And Danny Glover is the just villainous villain you can find on screen. This dude was horrible, man. Danny Glover played this role. I don't know if Danny Glover is like this in real life. I pray that he's not. He can't be. It's impossible to be this vile of a human being. Bruh, I was scared. Even when he popped up later on, or a couple of years later in Lethal Weapon, I still was scared. You know, I was scared of Danny Glover, and it even now, certain movies he popped up in. He was in a few years ago, Death at a Funeral. You know that remake with all the all black cast. It was he had shades of Mister in that in that movie. He played the old uncle in the wheelchair, just grumpy and ornery. And I was like, man, that's Mister there. He channeled Mister. But yeah, man, this was Sealy was just man. And overall, he settled for Silly because he wanted the other sister, Natty, right? But Natty was too young, or the dad didn't want to give up Natty, you know, because he wanted to do the same thing to Natty that he was doing to his other daughter. Boy, you talk about some vile human beings, man. And this is the first 10, 15 minutes of the movie you meeting these people. So it's like, my God, what type of movie is this? What is this? Um, yeah, I mean, vile human beings. But Natty ended up running away and coming and live with Celie and Mister, and then Mister trying to get with Natty and all this other foolishness. It's like, oh my God, and the abuse she goes through with uh, trying to raise his children, and I mean, it was that woman went through hell, bruh. Then that woman and Whoopi Goldberg, when we do eventually get to that point years later, where she's older and she's just broken down, just spiritually, physically, emotionally. I mean, just wrecked, completely wrecked. And Whoopi Goldberg played it so well. It, you know, at this time, I didn't know she was a comedian. So when I later on, like a year later or whenever, and I saw her on it was a special they did every year. What was it? It was her and Robin Williams and Billy Crystal. Was it Comic Relief? Comic Relief. That was my first time seeing. I'm like, man, she's a comedian, and then she started doing these other films. You know, like Fatal Beauty and stuff like that, Jumping Jack Flash and all that. And I was like, man, she is funny as I don't know what. How did she end up in that movie? You know, it was weird. It is weird that she channeled that, but it did earn her an Academy Award nomination. So, I mean, kudos to her. She did eventually win one a few years later with Ghost, another kind of comedic turn. And so when she played a comedic type of actor or character, I should say, she won an Academy Award. But this broken down human being that didn't win. I don't know who won that year, but it I think she was robbed. I think this whole film was robbed. But anywho's, this set up in Oprah Winfrey. Now, as Sophia. Now we didn't. This is before the Oprah show. You know, this is before she was Oprah. You know, she was Oprah Winfrey then. Now she's just Oprah. She just goes by one name now. And so, well, at least everybody refers to her as Oprah. You know who Oprah is. Uh, this is before all that. So when we see this woman just, I mean, no nonsense, takes nothing off of nobody. Uh, Beast of a woman. It was a complete contrast to Celie. You know, Celie just would take her abuse. Sophia, no. Sophia, if you hit Sophia, she's going to knock you out. You know, if you mess with Sophia, she's going to knock you out. I mean, that's just that. And it was funny, yet the setup for it, and I think this is what makes that character arc so unique. I haven't seen it in film since then. Um, the setup for her initial, I guess you could say, demise, um, for lack of a better term. I can't think of a better one right now, but it was funny. You know, people like she'll give Harpo a black eye, or and he'll lie about it, say a mule kicked him. you know, but Sophia then knocked him out, or when she knocks out old girl that's trying to get with Harpo, who's portrayed by Ray Don Chong, and eventually all that was funny until she hit that white man, until she knocked out that white man who I think was the mayor or the sheriff or something. He was something important. Well, he was white, so it is what it is. Until she hit that white man, and that's it. Stopped being funny. It became it became serious, and she ended up going to jail. They beat her. Now she's disfigured, and oh my god, in that scene when she told when she confronted Steely, because Harpo goes to Whoopi Goldberg or Silly and tell that, oh, Sophia don't listen and yada yada yada, and for Silly to tell Harpo, you beat her, if you wanted to listen, beat her. And that was soul crushing to me, because up to that point you're feeling sorry for Silly, because she's getting beat on, she's being raped and all this other stuff by her husband or whatever you want to call him. And that's all she knew, because that's all she knew from her father. That's all she knows from her husband. That's all she knows is abuse. And she knows that's what she do to, or at least that's what happens to her to get her to do what she want to do. Or the fear of that happening to her makes her do things that she to prevent her from being beat. So that's her solution to that problem. Oh, it was just beat her. And it's that it works on me. You know? And it was like, oh my God, that's all she knows. And for Harpo to try, when Harpo tried, that's when he got knocked out and talk about a mule kicked him. Um, and Sophia confronts Celie. You told Harpo to beat me. That famous line. And for that scene when Oprah, I always wondered why Oprah wasn't in more movies, because this was a powerful scene here. This showed that she has chops. Now she's popped up in other films throughout time, not too many, because she was doing her TV show thing, of course. But man, this showed that she's actually a good actress. I mean, she poured it out in that scene. All my life I had to fight my brothers. I had to fight every, she, I, I mean, bruh, it was powerful, you know, and it was an eye-opening experience for Celia as well. That started her to think like, okay, I'm looking at this wrong. Maybe I can fight back. Maybe there is a way for me. Now it didn't click right then, but that was the seed that was planted for that character. Uh, 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 uh can't think of her name. Who plays Suge? I think it was Margaret. Yeah, Margaret Avery, who played Suge Avery. She she had an awesome performance as well. I loved her performance because she was that, I guess you could say, prodigal daughter. She was not the prodigal son from the Bible, but the prodigal daughter. Her father is a preacher, a pastor, and pretty much banished Suge, because Suge wanted to go sing. She didn't want to sing in the church. She wanted to sing the blues. And that scene when uh, you could hear the choir singing from the church from across the way, and she's marching to the church singing that song, and boy, that was that. What's that song? I was about to sing a verse for y'all, but I can't remember the song. So y'all Too bad y'all missed out. But anyways, it was. I love that scene and the embrace of her and her father. That was it was beautiful. Not to mention, not to mention that this was my first time being exposed to a lesbian relationship in a film. It was hinted to. They didn't have a full blown lesbian relationship. I'm pretty sure it's more detailed in the book, but they didn't really go there in this movie. You also have to remember it was 1985, so they weren't gonna go there in 1985. But between Sealy and Suge, and it kind of made this little love triangle between Mister Suge and Sealy, and it was it was it was funny to see that dynamic in this film. It was just so much going on, but it wasn't jumbled. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't just thrown in the film for the sake of throwing stuff in there. It was nice. It was nicely done. Great job by Steven Spielberg. This was one of his best, man. This is one of his best films. Straight up. And we're talking Indiana Jones and the Schindler's List and the Jurassic Parks and all that other stuff. This is one of his top films in my opinion. I honestly am impressed on how he nailed this story and how he kept it real, to put it plainly. Great film. Uh, this film went on to be nominated for a record at the time, a record number of nominations at the Academy Awards, a grand total of 11. It also set a record. Well, the nominations were it was nominated for Best Original Song, Best Original Score, Best Makeup, Best Costume Design, Best Cinematography, Best Art Design, Best Screenplay, Best Supporting Actress for Oprah Winfrey and Margaret Avery, Best Actress for Whoopi Goldberg, and Best Picture. It did not get a Best Director nomination, which is a crime. Which I don't. It is a crime that Steven Spielberg did not get nominated for Best Director. Unbelievable. With all those nominations, you mean to tell me he wasn't a best one of the best directors that year? Didn't make sense. Well, going by the number of wins that they got, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. Why I say that? Because they got zero. It was 0 for 11 at the Academy Awards, which set a record for the most nominations without a single win. Unbelievable. That is unbelievable to me. Here's what it all lost off of. This is what happened at the Academy Awards in 1995. Oh, 85. It was The Color Purple was nominated for Best Picture. It lost to Out of Africa. Now, to be fair, I never watched Out of Africa. It looked boring to me. But the other nominations were Witness, Kiss of the Spider Woman, and what is that? Posse's Honor. Never saw them. I don't think I seen it. I saw Witness. I haven't seen any other of them. I haven't seen it. Out of Africa just looked boring, but it won Best Picture. Best Director, which Steven Spielberg did not get nominated in, Sidney Pollack won, who directed Out of Africa. There were no Best Actor nominations, even though you can make an argument that Danny Glover should have been nominated that year. I'll just give you the list. You had William Hurt won for Kiss of the Spider Woman, and you had Harrison Ford nominated, James Garner, Jack Nicholson, and John Voight. They were all nominated. I don't know. That was a tough class. That was tough. So I can go with that. Best Actress, which Whoopi Goldberg was nominated for in that category, you had Gwendolyn Page. She won for The Trip Too Bountiful. Never seen that movie. I never I never even heard of that movie. I don't even know who that actress is. Uh Gwendolyn Page? I don't know who that is. Anyways, best supporting actress where you had two. I guess they canceled each other out. Uh Whoopi Gold, not Whoopi, Oprah Winfrey and Margaret Avery. Uh they lost to Angelica Houston that year. Uh I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Now, best screenplay, it lost to Out of Africa. Again, Out of Africa just I guess just destroyed them. That was just the wrong year to go up against Out of Africa, apparently. Crazily enough, another screenplay was nominated that year and lost, Back to the Future, which is the perfect screenplay. I don't care what you can go back in the annals of history of filmmaking. Back to the Future is the perfect screenplay, and it did not win at the Academy Awards. But yeah, man. As always, all films you can go back, especially with those nominations and stuff. And yeah, Oscars got it wrong on a lot of things. Like I said, to be fair, I never saw Out of Africa. So, but I will say this: you don't hear people talking about Out of Africa today. Whereas you still hear about people talk about The Color Purple today. So it is what it is. The Color Purple, as I said, is one of Steven Spielberg's greatest accomplishments in his career. One of the most underrated accomplishments in his career, believe it or not. And for all parties involved, this is probably the pinnacle of all of their careers, even though they all went on to have super successful careers. And I'm talking acting wise. I know you're probably screaming into your computer or phone or wherever you're listening to this show. Uh Oprah Winfrey, this wasn't her greatest account. I understand she's a billionaire. I know that. I'm talking about acting wise. So all of that, Whoopi Goldberg, yeah, she won an Oscar for Ghost, but you know, she's more well known for Silly. Yeah, this is one of her biggest accomplishments. Danny Glover, this really got him to that Lethal Weapon stage. I don't think he would have got Lethal Weapon if it wasn't for this film, and so on and so forth. And I already mentioned that Steven Spielberg said that this was the stepping stone for him to make serious films like Schindler's List and Empire of the Sun and Saving Private Ryan and films like that. So this if it wasn't for this film, we wouldn't get the great accomplishments that he had later on in his career. But it all started in 1985 with the film The Color Purple, which gets a letter grade of an A. Uh, very, very awesome film. I love The Color Purple. Uh, Coincidentally, The Color Purple is my favorite color. I love everything associated with purple. That is my favorite color of all time. Purple Rain with Prince, one of my favorite albums, and I enjoyed that movie too. It's just something about The Color Purple that just warms my heart. But that's not it with The Color Purple. Later this year, Christmas to be exact, we're getting the remake. Well, not really a remake. We're getting the musical version of The Color Purple on film. Uh, this go around, you're gonna have R&B artist Fantasia taking over the role of Celie. We have Carmen Diego as Mister, Taraji P. Henson as Suge Avery. We're gonna have Corey Hawkins as Harpo, Danielle Brooks as Sophia, as well as uh her has a role in here. And I'm saying her, like, like who is her? If you're in the R&B, you know who her is. She's a R&B artists. Sierra is in this film. Haley Bailey is in this film. I think Sierra is playing Nettie, the sister, and Haley Bailey is playing the younger version of Nettie. So that's interesting. Louis Gossip Jr. is in this film. David Allen Greer is in this film. And the list goes on. It's a lot of people that are in this. I guess you could say remake of, well, the musical remake of The Color Purple. So be on the lookout for that. I can't wait for that. And everybody that was involved with the 1985 film is involved in some fashion. Behind the camera, Quincy Jones, Steven Spielberg, and Oprah Winfrey are producing this film. So they still have their hands involved in it. So that is amazing. That is awesome. I can't wait for that. But before we get there, you can still go and watch the original from 1985. The Color Purple gets an A. And it all started with a book. It all started with a book by Alice Walker. And I'm glad that I got the opportunity to talk about this today. I wanted to talk about something poignant today for Black History. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to just talk about your normal standard spiritual Negro spirituals. Yeah, I wanted to go into some good news. Reading a book. And full disclosure, I wasn't a big reader. I never was a big reader growing up, even though my last name is Reed. I never was that type of person to pick up books and read. If it wasn't a comic book, it had to have pictures in it. I guess you could say, but every now and then I'll read a book, but I never was an avid reader. And it wasn't until I got older until I started really picking up books and reading them. And I regret not reading them when I was young. I regret not picking up books and reading. And I guess better late than never, because now I feel 10 times smarter, you know, and happier that I read. And so I wanted to talk about some of our great writers throughout history, and maybe this encouraged some of you to pick up some books and read them, or pick up some of the people we named today, and might have piqued your interest. Like, oh, I want to read something from so and so, or this, that, and the third. And if that's the case, I've done my job. I've done all I was supposed to do. So everybody, happy Black History Month. I'm glad you joined me on this episode of Movie Goodness as we celebrate Black History. Wish we could have discussed it earlier in the month. It would have felt a little better, but I so much was going on. So much was going on this month that kind of deviated our Black History episode, but it's here. Here it is. You can contact the show, emailing the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. Also look me up on Twitter at KB Radio Network, and on other social media feeds, just look up the KB Radio Network. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to Movie Goodness here on the KB Radio Network, don't forget we're on YouTube as well. Swing over to YouTube, give us a subscribe as well. Thank you once again. Hope you enjoyed your February, your Black History. Hope everybody celebrated it in some shape, form, or fashion. But remember, just because February comes to an end, that doesn't mean we end celebrating Black History. Black History is 365 days of the year. Everybody, thank you for joining me once again. I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.